When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, let's get you a story out of Dollar des Ormeaux. A woman in DDO has been fined over $10,000 for having a tempo up over her car. How many of you, by the way, have tempos in your neck of the woods, right? Some of you would call it a lifesaver over the winter months and saving you from clearing off the snow, right? Now, this woman lives with a disability and says the tempo has given her freedom. But the city, DDO, says it must come down. Despite the mayor saying that the city tries to accommodate people with disabilities, this story might suggest otherwise. Charlotte Gibson is the woman in question, who's been disabled since breaking her leg and ankle, slipping on ice 8 years ago. Her injury has meant that she has trouble walking and is not able to clear snow off her car. As a result, Gibson has asked the city for an exemption to put a tempo up after the ban was imposed in 2018, but was denied. Despite this, she decided to put one up anyways. She's now received about 25 fines, about $10,000 worth. Advocates are now calling on the city to support the disabled community. Let's find out more. Stephen Laperrière is the general director of RAPLIQ, a Quebec accessibility rights group. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. So
what's your take on this? You know, this is a rule for all of DDO, applies to everyone. This ban on tempos here. I know that makes the situation different than a borough or a city that picks and chooses who to enforce rules with. What's your take on this woman that has a disability, says they need their tempo, and is being told by the city to get rid of it?
Well, the first thing I'd have to say is if you look at it from a discrimination standpoint, following this case on a discrimination based on handicap, I don't think that it's a winning situation, because tempos are not allowed for everyone. And I'm sure that in DDO, as well as in other boroughs in Montreal, elderly people would like to have tempos, and they're not allowed also. But once this is said, it is clear that Miss Gibson needs some type of accommodation, and that's where, in our estimation, the city or the borough, the councillors, the mayor must come into play and find what's the best alternative. I don't know the specific ins and outs of the communications between the borough and Miss Gibson. But for sure, the borough has the obligation to find an accommodation to Miss Gibson, and she has to be part of the communication. I don't think going to court on that specific topic would be the best thing to do at this point, with what I know so far. Mm-hmm. And I understand. I don't know the house of the lady. I understand that there might be some security issues with the tempos. I mean, it's possible. Who am I to judge on that? But at the same time, it is clear that this lady needs some type of accommodation, whether by the borough or whether other organizations in her borough. There are boroughs in Montreal where organizations using young people that are reintegrating the work environment are available, and go shovel disabled people's entries or elderly people entries. So it is such a service offered in DDO. That would be one thing worth checking out.
How do we do in Quebec in general when it comes to those accommodations? And it could be in a city like this, a borough of Montreal, anywhere else in the province here. How do local boroughs and cities do when it comes to those accommodations? Put this specific story aside. Do you see a willingness, generally speaking, from mayors and councillors to accommodate?
Well, there are more and more organizations working with boroughs and cities to help out the elderly people and people with disabilities shoveling their entries. There are more and more because it's a necessity. And the cities, the boroughs, don't necessarily have the staff or organizations to put that in place. So they have to work hand in hand with local organizations that can supply that service. More and more, I think everybody is aware that it's a need. It's not a privilege to do that. It's a need, because we all know when it snows and the sidewalks are barely cleaned from the snow, and the entrances, the elderly and people with disabilities are stuck at home. They can't move, and this is not tolerable. So you have to do something about it. And I don't think that the cities and boroughs don't have the capacity to organize that. So they need to rely on organizations, on local organizations to do that.
We're with Stephen Laperrière, the General Director of RAPLIQ, a Quebec Accessibility Rights Group. So, Stephen, let's talk about that just for a second, or what you brought up at the end. This is Quebec. We have rough winters. We've had a lot of snow over the last month, right? Like, we've been getting hit hard with snowstorm after snowstorm. And, you rightfully mentioned people with disabilities, the elderly, right? When that happens, there's a whole bunch of different ways that, their mobility is affected. I just think about trying to get on a city bus in this city if the curb isn't properly plowed and that kind of thing. So do we need to do a better job in this province when it comes to the winter of making sure the city is as accessible and mobility is as easy as it is during the summertime?
Well, yes, we need to do better. We need to do better in sidewalk cleanings. In some boroughs, the situation is absolutely horrible for people in wheelchairs. They need to clear better the areas where the paratransit picks you up on the bus and drops you off, because some places it's not done properly. And of course, like I said, the sidewalks, that's very important. In some boroughs, it's still a nightmare to this day to go there. I think that there are some boroughs that are doing better than they were. But overall, if you look at overall in Quebec, a lot needs to be done. And in some regions, they say, well, there's not enough handicapped people to justify the expense to do a better job. So it's we have a long ways to go in order to assure people with disabilities and the elderly people full total mobility in wintertime. And it's not like we expect everything to be picked up within 24 hours. We all need to be reasonable. But at the end of the day, when it's like more than 3-4 days, I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I don't think one of the major problems, I think, is that most of the boroughs in Montreal, they don't keep an inventory of their places where the débarcadère. I'm sorry, I'm losing the word in English. I'm sorry.
Drop off points or
that's correct. Drop off points. They don't have an inventory on that on those. So how can you tell the city workers to go and clean those drop-off points if you don't supply an inventory list of where they have to go? Because when there's a foot of snow, I mean, how can you tell if it's a drop-off point or not when you're passing with the plow,
Stephen, I want to thank you for coming on the program here, and I think we've highlighted just some of the issues Quebecers face, those with disabilities or seniors face over the winter months, just getting around, just getting into their car and things like that. Stephen, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
That's Stephen Laperrière, he's General Director of RAPLIQ, a Quebec Accessibility Rights Group.